Welcome to the Flower Empowered. I hope that if you have joined the live stream either on YouTube or on Facebook, that you can both see and hear me. We will be taking questions in the comments, so if anybody has any questions. It does not seem to be live. Let's see. There we go. It is live. Okay, so we can talk about pretty much anything today. I know that there were some people who had asked questions a little bit earlier. So we had actually planned on doing this live stream back in December, but I had some issues with my microphone and my webcam, and yeah, nothing went the way that it was supposed to. So I rescheduled everything to now. So if I look, I can see that we have 5 people on the chat right now, not so many, but if any of you have a question, you can just type your question in the comments section and I will do my best to answer. I have lots of little props here if you would like to see any particular devices, or if you have any questions about the pelvis, for example. I do have the pelvis here. So maybe we can start with one of the questions that I received on the chat the last time we were planning to have one of these calls. So the question was around my own condition. So I do have pelvic floor dysfunction. I did have a mesh surgery, had the mesh taken away. I have a rectocele, which is a pelvic organ prolapse. And I did have somebody ask whether or not I was still symptomatic. The answer is sometimes. So if you have a pelvic organ prolapse, you would be aware that there are certain times when that pelvic organ prolapse is more symptomatic. So if we think about the pelvic organ prolapse, if you think about your pelvis as though it is an airtight chamber, and there's lots of stretchy tissue in there. And if you think of a prolapse being like a potential for expansion in an area where maybe you wouldn't need expansion, then we could imagine that the balloon here is a prolapse. And if you have more tight tissues on the balloon and you blow the balloon up, you'll have a little bit of an area that is a bit more kind of expanded. Now, that can happen if you get constipated, if you have a pelvic organ prolapse and you bear down, then you're going to feel more symptomatic. And actually, that's just about the only time that I ever feel that I have any symptoms at all. So we can look at, if I can share a screen and I can show you a little bit what the pelvic organ prolapse can look like. So if we just take that one off. So when you think about pelvic organ prolapse, if you can learn to manage the intra-abdominal pressures, and if you can keep a strong pelvic floor, the pelvic floor will act like a support underneath the organs, then when you do have an increase in intra-abdominal pressure, your ability to manage the intra-abdominal pressure and to manage the tension on the pelvic floor, so to be able to create contraction on the pelvic floor, will help to prevent your POP from being symptomatic. So it will help to prevent you from blowing up the POP balloon. So I hope that's a little bit interesting, and I hope that answers the question for the girl who asked that question about symptoms. Your symptoms don't necessarily exist all of the time. The other thing to consider is that during a normal monthly cycle, there is like an ebb and flow. So your organs don't always sit in exactly the same position, particularly the womb, which over the course of the month will get slightly larger and slightly heavier. So during the cycle, the womb tends to sit a little bit lower. And I do actually have a little infographic for that as well. So let me just bring that one up on screen. So still keeping with the pelvic organ prolapse, and I'm just going to share this. Hopefully you can hear me now. This is, I have a little bit of an issue, I think, with my audio. So when the uterus sits a little bit lower, as it does when you're going through your menstrual cycle, you can generally feel it if you put the fingers into the vagina. And then over the course of the cycle, particularly when you're moving towards ovulation, the uterus sits a little bit higher, so that the cervix is higher, so you're less likely to feel it. It's quite high, and then it comes down again. Now, if you have pelvic organ prolapse, sometimes this can mean that you actually feel the prolapse more around the time of your cycle. So it can be that that you notice that there's times of the month when you have no symptoms, and other times of the month when you can have a lot of symptoms. And if you are dealing with stress incontinence, for example, you can also see something similar, where you may be able to run and do all kinds of exercise during the time when you're ovulating and when the cervix is in a higher position. And then as the month goes on, when you get closer to your cycle, everything can feel a little bit heavier, because it is. And you can actually find that you're more symptomatic. So I know that when I had stress incontinence, after I had my mesh taken away, I was completely incontinent. But in the time when I was trying to regain my continence, there was, I did find that around a particular time of the month, when I was still working to get rid of the stress incontinence, it was harder when my womb was sitting lower. So it's something that's worth considering. And I would have used that also when doing the training last year. So I did bodybuilding last year. I was more gentle and compassionate with myself. I didn't push as hard around the time of my cycle, around the time when I felt that there was, I had that heavier sensation, in order to prevent kind of a blowing up of the POP balloon, shall we say. So does anybody have any questions in the chat? Andy, thank you very much for letting me know that the audio was muted when I was showing the screens. That's good to know. This is my first time using this streaming software, so yeah, it's a little It's a little interesting. Let's see, we have a question. How long does it take to fully relax the pelvic floor muscles? I have exercised every day because I keep feeling tension, and exercise helps me a lot. So when it comes to hypertonicity in the pelvic floor, if you think about your muscle like elastic, when the muscles are hypertonic, if you imagine, okay, so this is the two filaments in a muscle, and they basically hold on to each other like this. And when you contract a muscle, it shortens, and when you relax a muscle, it lengthens. Now, with hypertonicity, it tends to be gripping like this, and it can take a little bit of time to let those filaments reset so that you get an optimal length-tension relationship where it's holding with a decent grip so that it can both shorten and lengthen. Consistency is key. So you have to keep working, and when you're working with trying to create length, I don't want you to think that what you're doing is stretching the muscle like a piece of elastic and then it's going to stay there, because that's not really what's happening. What you're doing is communicating to the nervous system. You're letting the nervous system know that you want a little bit more length. So you have to do this by consistently telling the nervous system what you need. Your nervous system tries to manage your survival, and it's always trying to protect you above all else. So it's going to make adjustments based on what it is learning through the things that you do and the things that you think about. So if you can keep one of the first places to start, if you can keep stress away from the mind. So if you can bring yourself to, I like to call it the rested state, where you're not, constantly on that wheel of irritation in your mind. If you can get yourself to calm down internally, so emotionally, if you can try to settle the nervous system in that way by finding a little bit of equanimity in the thoughts, bringing the thoughts to a kind of calmer space, that's a really, really key thing when it comes to releasing tension in the body. If one of the things that you can do in order to trick your nervous system into relaxing a little bit is to use your breath. So when you inhale and exhale, typically your body will do the breathing for you. And if you exercise, then of course use your muscles and you breathe a little bit more. But under normal circumstances, when you're moving about during the day, if you feel stress in your mind, that stress is going to manifest as tension in your body. So the thing to do, the next time you feel that you're a little bit stressed, stop and relax, and then start to see, where do I feel this in my body? And then you want to try to get the nervous system to let go. And a really nice trick for this is to extend the exhalation. So if you inhale for the count of 4 and then exhale for the count of 8. So you inhale like a deep, strong inhale, and then you exhale very slowly. And this actually tricks the nervous system to kind of move into the rest and digest mode. And if you can do that consistently during the day, you start to bring the body to the rested state. And if you can get the body to spend a little bit more time in the rested state, it's easier for the body to leave the tension. The other thing that you can do in stressful situations when you feel the tension, because usually you'll feel it could be around the chest or it could be around the hips. If you can, in that stress state, do that little breathing exercise, maybe 10 rounds of that relaxing breath, and then try at the same time to relax the tension, relax around the hips, relax around the shoulders, wherever you feel that you hold tension. That will actually prolong the amount of time that you get out of that hypertonic state. So when you do the pelvic floor exercises, you should feel relief then. But if you do these exercises during other parts of the day, that will extend it. I hope that helps. I'm going to take a little look and see what else do we have here. So I have somebody saying, I was recently diagnosed with a rectocele and an enterocele. I'm a jumping fitness instructor and was advised to stop immediately because it could worsen the prolapse and the symptoms. So Pernille, we had just a few minutes ago, I talked a little bit about prolapse. So when you think about these prolapses, they are, it's, if you think of it like the path of least resistance in your pelvis. Now, if it's a rectocele and an enterocele, that means that a little bit of the posterior wall, so the back wall towards the anus, there is a point of weakness there, and an enterocele would be a little bit higher. But maybe, I don't know if you've had a hysterectomy. Very often the enterocele is something that can happen after hysterectomy, but even without hysterectomy, you can have it where around the vaginal fornix, so the space above the around the cervix where the womb is, that you can sometimes have a little bit of weakness in the tissue there. Now, the default state isn't for those tissues to be expanded. They expand when there is an increase in intra-abdominal pressure. And yes, jumping will do that. What you would need to do, you will need to take, I would say, a little bit of time away from jumping and work on pelvic floor strength and work on balancing and managing, learning to manage intra-abdominal pressure. Now, the key when you do this, you have to retrain your pelvic floor to sit higher, and you do this by maximum strength contractions. So there's a couple of videos on the channel that teach how to do maximum strength contractions, and they will help to lift and to create a little bulk in the pelvic floor. And then you also need to be able to manage a co-contraction between the pelvic floor and the abdominals. If you can get a good balance going through the core, then the trick with jumping is when you are up, you have to do a maximum strength contraction when you're in the air. And this, along with that co-contraction, can help to balance the tension when you land. So when you land, you also need to make sure that you absorb some of the ground reaction forces through a bend in the knee. And it can be also useful to do some retraining of tension through the lower limb. So I would do faraway bridges, for example, where you put the feet quite far away and you work on lifting the bridges. I hope that helps. You will get back to jumping, but don't do it right away. Take a break, work a little bit on building strength and control, and then you should be able to do some level of jumping, but you will need to train for it. Let's see. Jumping, I see you say that jumping has helped your stress incontinence. That is stress incontinence. If you can make your pelvic floor stronger, you should be able to jump, you should be able to run, you should be able to do all of these things. So it is like it's a balance. You need to be able to manage intra-abdominal pressure and tension in all of the different planes of movement, and in dynamic and functional movements. So it's never just a question of doing 3 sets of 10 pelvic floor exercises every day. You need to train the body to do what it is you want it to do. But dynamic exercise is very good for stress incontinence. So I can see that I did, as part of my return to running after stress incontinence, I did jumping. I actually have a trampoline specifically for that purpose. Let's see. Okay, we have another question. I don't have incontinence issues unless I laugh too hard. Do you have advice on how to strengthen my pelvic floor? Yes. So for the laugh P and the sneeze P, the knack is what you need to learn. Now, the knack is a pre-tensioning of the pelvic floor. Now, I like to, maybe if you've been on the channel for a while, maybe you've seen that I like to break the pelvic floor exercises down into different parts. Once you do the different parts, like you break the pelvic floor exercise into steps, and the reason you do this is so that you learn to feel all of the different parts of your pelvic floor. And what you'll find when you do this is that there are likely some parts of the pelvic floor that are responding very well and other parts of the pelvic floor that don't respond at all. Now, with any part that doesn't respond at all, place your finger on that part. It helps to send a signal to the brain, re-enhance the connection between the muscle and the brain. And that allows you to get that little contraction. And then after you've worked on all the separate parts, then you can start to work on the knack. And the knack is where you pre-tension. So it's where you take a contraction before you laugh, before you cough, before you sneeze, or before you jump. Now, practice really makes perfect. If you do the knack, I like to do it with a tissue. So you get a tissue, you pre-tension the pelvic floor with a contraction that is reasonably strong, and then blow your nose while holding that, what you'll find is that you don't feel the pressure down in your pelvic floor. And when you can get to that stage where you can control the intra-abdominal pressure, you'll be able to sneeze, cough, and jump and do all kinds of wonderful things without an issue. Let me see. Yes, I will actually, I will put some links in this to the videos that show how to prepare, how to do the pelvic floor exercises where it's broken down, and then how to build up. There is actually, on the channel, there's a sequence of videos that should take you through first finding all the different parts and getting those working, then starting to do a full Kegel where you contract everything at the same time. Then we have some endurance exercises where you hold for a little while breathing in and out, and then you have some speed exercises where you try to contract, release, contract, release, contract, release. And then we also have max strength Kegels. Now with those, what we try to do is create a co-contraction between the lower abdominals and the pelvic floor, where you take it, so let's imagine that the pelvic floor is my hand, and this is like, I'm going to hold this. Now you see I can hold this like this all day, no effort. So I like to think of that on the pelvic floor scale as an RPE of 4. Rate of perceived effort is 4. You can hold it all day. But if I have to squeeze this really hard, then I can't squeeze it really hard for long because my hand will run out of energy. I'll use up all the ATP, the fuel for a strong contraction. So what you want to be able to do with the pelvic floor is to hold it like you're going to hold it all day, but then do a strong contraction as strong as you can, and then relax it to holding it like you would all day and then contracting. And actually we will have some videos coming up on how to do yoga while you're doing those types of contractions. Okay, there's more up there, right? Where do we see? What am I missing? So I am overweight at 200 pounds. I am newly pregnant as well. Congratulations. I had a C-section 7.5 years ago. Sex feels wonderful, no pain, but sometimes there is no feeling unless I practice the yoni egg before. Okay, so when it comes to loss of sensation, one of the key things in getting sensation back is what you're doing there. When you use the yoni egg, you're creating a contraction. You're doing a little bit of strength training. If you regularly practice doing pelvic floor contraction and relaxation, that does help with sensation. Now, another thing that you can try is to get a feather or something very soft and then use very, very gentle kind of sensations. So I want you to think of it this way. Your pelvic floor has it has motor nerves and it has sensory nerves. So like, let's think on the skin. So for sensing and for feeling what happens on the skin. Now, the more that you can get both of those types of nerves to fire, the more sensation you're going to feel. When you start to feel that the power has gone out of the sensation when you're trying to become aroused or have sex, it can be very useful to work both of those things. So to do exercises where you work on both strengthening and lengthening, so both pelvic floor contractions, and we also have some relax your pelvic floor videos. They're very good to do to get everything lengthening a little bit. And then the other thing is to work on the visceral response. So there, think taking like a feather, for example, up the inside of the legs where you have the adductor muscles. The sensation of coming up the inside and coming around, it brings the nervous system awareness like viscerally to that whole area, and that can really help to improve sensation. So both with touch and with contraction. So you're hitting both types of nerves. So you're getting both sensory and motor, and that will make a difference. Now, the thing that I will say, if you are pregnant, you will need to consider, if you go to do any relaxation exercises or any yoga, because you have more relaxin in your system, that is a hormone that helps to lengthen and kind of open the joints so that the hips open, like the pelvis will open enough for delivery, but also the muscles. So everything gets a little bit more lax and the connective tissues all get a little bit more lax. So you have to be careful when you practice. You have to adapt any practice to kind of take into consideration that you are pregnant. So it is good if you have a local yoga teacher who is trained in pregnancy yoga. You really should work with one rather than just going online and following a video. Be very careful with your joints when you're pregnant. And let me see, I can see somebody's asking about asthma treatment. So I'm not an expert in asthma. I can't really help with that. If you're asking about breathing, there's some breathing exercises on the channel. You could maybe take a look at those. From a pelvic floor perspective, if you cough a lot, that can have an impact on your pelvic floor. If you work on the pelvic floor exercises, that can help to support you if you have asthma. And if you're going to cough, a little bit like what I mentioned earlier, doing the neck, pre-tensioning the pelvic floor is very good. So you hold the contraction before you cough. That can be very useful. Let me see, have I missed anything else here? I see you're asking also for a cure for bronchitis, asthma. I can't help. I'm sorry. I'm not a doctor. I'm a yoga teacher. So I really can't help there. I would have time for one more question. If anybody has one. And I don't see any more questions. So I'm going to do another one of these. Another question. Let's see. I've been recommended for surgery, repair of defects, and not a hysterectomy. Not sure about the surgery. What do I think? Okay, Pernille, my advice when it comes to surgery is to try conservative treatments for at least 18 months before opting for surgery. And if you do opt for surgery, do not have surgery with mesh. It is a very bad idea. It is still promoted. In Sweden, where I come from, it is almost the primary treatment when there are problems either with stress incontinence or pelvic organ prolapse. But the risks associated with mesh are very high, and then if they have to take it away, it is devastating. I've been through it. I just wouldn't recommend it to anyone. Now, when it comes to surgeries for pelvic organ prolapse, in some cases it is needed. But if you think back to what I said at the start, and I'm not sure if everybody heard because I was trying to show the graphic of the prolapses and to explain a little about intra-abdominal pressures. The pelvic organ prolapse is basically something that happens when you have a point of weakness, and pressure will always look for the path of least resistance, and that point of weakness in the tissue is the path of least resistance. So if we think about this balloon, if I blow this balloon, so you can see that the pressure is very evenly distributed in this balloon. But if there was a weak spot, it would be like a little kind of pop like this. You would have a little bulge. That is what a pelvic organ prolapse is. But it has to be under pressure. That's the thing. When you hear you have a pelvic organ prolapse, you automatically think that there's a bulge, but there isn't necessarily a bulge. There is a bulge when there is pressure. If you can learn to manage pressure and to rebalance tension in your body and to lift the pelvic floor through strength exercises, what you can do is manage pelvic organ prolapse. I have a pelvic organ prolapse, and I did have a surgery actually at the same time as the mesh was fitted. They did a rectoceal surgery. It doesn't address the root cause of the problem. The root cause is an inability to manage tension. It's an inability to manage pressure increases, intra-abdominal pressure. So I would advise before you go for surgery, before you even consider it, try to learn to manage intra-abdominal pressures. If you do have surgery, that is going to repair that point of weakness, but pressure will still look for the path of least resistance. And I think in about 40% of cases, it will find a new path of least resistance, and that will be a new pelvic organ prolapse. So much better to first try to learn to balance intra-abdominal pressures and increase the tension in the pelvic floor. Okay, let's see. I am male and I just recently found your channel. I have suffered terribly over the past few years, chronic tension and pelvic pain. So when it comes to chronic tension and pelvic pain, the place that I always believe you should start is with the mind. If you can get your mind into a more calm and relaxed place, the tension in your body, overall in your body, is going to reduce. Now, there's lots of exercises on the channel to help to get the pelvic floor to relax. But if you want to maintain that relaxation, it is very important that you don't put lots of tension back in your body throughout the day. So you should really try, if there's something stressful, if you have a stressful job, if you're in stressful relationship, if different things are happening that are creating a lot of stress in your life, try to deal with some of those stresses. Most importantly, deal with your thoughts about those stresses, and try to calm the nervous system as much as possible using the method where you breathe in for 4, out for 8, while focusing on the areas where you feel tension and trying to relax them. That's my little trick for releasing tension. I hope that helps. Okay, I think that is it for today. I am going to do another one of these lives next Wednesday. So if you have more questions between now and then, Elias is saying, thank you. I'm diligently on the path to recovery. Brilliant. Just really stick with it. Just stay with yourself. Just think of it this way. Your nervous system is like a little buddy that comes with you through your whole life. And if you can kind of keep that little buddy calm and happy, then the body will be a lot calmer and a lot happier. So like, be your own best friend and think of your nervous system as a really important part of you that needs to be kept in a kind of happy and relaxed state. It'll make it much easier on the muscular tension. Nikki says, I had a total hysterectomy 8 years ago, totally regret it. But yeah, I understand. It's very easy to regret the things that we've done there. Been having a lot of pain and pressure in the pelvic floor and rectally, yeah. Okay, you're deathly afraid prolapse is going to start. It's very hard not to be afraid, particularly when you've had your womb removed and you start to feel the pressure and you think, oh, this is terrible. What I want you to realize is that fear is going to add tension, and that is generally going to add tension in places where you're going to most likely increase the intra-abdominal pressure. So the first thing to do is to address the fear. So I like to use Byron Katie's The Work, where you question the thoughts, you turn them around a little bit. You ask, how would you feel if you weren't having those thoughts? For me, that's been a very, very effective way to do it. And then I want you to realize that it's, even if there is prolapse, it's not the end of the world, and it's not inevitable that you're going to have a lot of issues. You can learn to manage your intra-abdominal pressure. You can learn to rebalance the tension in your body, and you can learn to strengthen your pelvic floor and also to relax, because if you're deathly afraid, it's likely that you're probably hypertonic in your pelvic floor, because we get very tense, and the more tense we get, the harder it is for that tension to be managed. It really is like a balancing act between allowing there to be enough flexibility and allowing there to be enough tension. If there's too much tension, the path of least resistance is going to be easier to get to because everything else is tense, and then it's easier to get through. And if there's not enough tension, then that can also be difficult. So it's very important that if you think of your pelvis, like everything down there as being squishy, like soft like a balloon, it's very important that the balloon has even tension. So relaxation, the pelvic floor relaxation exercises, very important if you have prolapse. Very important to rebalance the tension. And I'm not sure if you've seen the work of Anna Kroll. She is a researcher from the UK, and she has been doing myofascial release on women that have prolapse. Now, I'll put a link in the description to her channel. She also explains the biotensegrity model using like this, like a little pelvis. But if you think about the pelvis, what she does is she releases taut tissues, so tension. She releases tension so that the tension is more evenly balanced throughout the pelvis. And that means that when there is intra-abdominal pressure, things expand more uniformly. And in that case, there is no balloon. There's no pop in the balloon. You're not blowing up your pop balloon because the tension can move more evenly. So the first thing to do is take away the fear and take away the tension. once you start to relax and you start to take the tension out of the system, you will probably find that if you are having symptoms, that they're going to subside, they're going to release. You can go to a pelvic floor physiotherapist, and if you go to one that is myofascially trained, they will be able to do release of tight tissues and of scar tissues, and that can really help with the balancing of tension, which will allow, when you do have some intra-abdominal pressure, it will allow that pressure to distribute a little bit more evenly rather than bearing down on just one point of least resistance. Also learning to manage your own intra-abdominal pressure, learning to strengthen your pelvic floor and to pre-tension the pelvic floor if you are going to cough, sneeze, or if you're exercising, if you're running or jumping, that will help a lot. I hope that answer was a little bit helpful. I feel like I'm waffling. No, I'm not used to doing these lives at all. Let's see. Oh, thank you for the kind words, Heather. And thank you to everybody who said thank you as well. I really hope that this becomes useful and that this helps people. I get so many questions every day. I get emails, I get comments on different videos on the channel. I get people in the community on thefloweремpowered.com. I get so many questions, and I feel like I'm giving everyone the same answers. And that's why I thought this could be really helpful, because I get to give some answers and then lots of people can watch the video and get the answers. And maybe if we do a few of these, it'll help a lot more people than just the individual messages that I'm answering. But I think that's it for tonight. I think I have to finish up. I have to go and have my dinner. I am rather hungry. I hope you've all enjoyed this. Please do, if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please do subscribe. And if you have further questions after everything that I've said here, just go ahead and put them in the comment section or send me a little link across. I will put some links in the comments to some of the videos that I talked about, and I am making new content at the minute. So if there are any videos that you are interested in seeing, if you think that there's something that you would like to know and you're not seeing it, you can come on next week and ask here. You can send me a little message or put a little comment down below. Wish you all a really wonderful evening, and remember to talk about pelvic floor dysfunction. When we talk about these things, we help to break the taboo, and that will really help all of those people that are currently suffering in silence. Together, we can and will make a difference.